Welcome back, everybody. The Factually Football podcast is back, and we have officially reached true preseason week one, not Hall of Fame week as it's known in the NFL. And happy to be joined by Andrew and Cody again this week. Fellas, you want to say hey?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. You're right. It's about time, man. About time for some preseason action, some actual games, when you're not hitting your same team over and over. So really excited for this week.
Yeah, preseason is, if you're diehard NFL fans like we are, I don't know about you guys, but I'll be glued to my TV for as many games as I can possibly see, obviously, with a closer attention on the Colts. But, it's kind of interesting. I think it's a good little segue into, preseason and the Colts potentially playing some of their starters. At least I think that's what's been reported, which is a little different from years past. So maybe we'll touch on that a little bit more soon. But I think it's definitely intriguing given how the Colts have started the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Let's kind of chat about that now. Every team has a little bit different philosophy. We kind of touched on it last week. The two teams that played last week in Jacksonville and Vegas, you saw some kind of intriguing Bill Belichick-ish play from Josh McDaniels, which we can all expect more of this year. But, he played Josh Jacobs a fair amount. Didn't play some of the other guys, obviously, but caught us some intriguing choices there, which sparked up some, is Josh Jacobs going to be traded type of stuff, which was pretty quickly shot down. But even as we'll kind of talk through the AFC South games this week is really what we're going to talk through and what we may see. But, it's even intriguing as I was preparing for the cast today, how different each team is taking it. So what are you guys hearing? Did I hear, Andrew, you're hearing that the ones will get some run here in this first one?
Yeah, it's been reported by a few other guys, a few other reporters as well. But yeah, what I've seen is that the ones are expected to get a little bit of playing time. How much playing time, we don't know exactly yet. But as I mentioned earlier, it's definitely different from the usual. 2s and 3s usually get the main run, and with the exception of rookies like Kwity Paye, played a few downs last year in preseason, obviously to get acclimated to that NFL level. But yeah, this preseason should be interesting. Do I expect full, 2 or 3 quarters? And no, of course not. But Matt Ryan, and you have a new quarterback and a lot of new offensive weapons, and I think there's no really better way to gain rapport with those guys than to play when the game kind of matters. And in preseason, I guess you could maybe argue isn't the regular season, but reps are reps. So.
Yep. I would say, I would echo that, Andrew. So Frank Reich basically said that, there's going to be more starters playing a bit more snaps this preseason than in the past. And so, but he also said the volume will be incremental. So it's not like they're going to be in there for, a whole, maybe even like a whole half, so we'll see exactly what that looks like. But it does seem like in some shape and form, about every single player, minus maybe a few, will at least see some action in the preseason. So, and I think that's good for a team that, has a lot of new additions, especially like you talked about on the offensive side, a new quarterback, potentially a new number 2 wide receiver, 2 new tight ends. There's a lot that this offense and even some of the defense too, with some of their guys, they just need to learn how to, come together, and that cohesion is still something that is a question mark and should be.
Yeah. And I was talking to one of the Colts executives on Monday, and good guy. And we were kind of chatting back and forth, and I just said, it's here, how you feeling? And, we were talking a little bit about camp, and crazy enough, on Monday, they actually surpassed their attendance for all of last year. So pretty cool out there. But then he said, our guys are just really ready to hit someone else. and another team. So it'll be exciting. Well, let's kind of jump into it here. The first game I want to talk about, I'll just go honestly by date, is the Baltimore Tennessee game. Love to kind of get you guys' take. Obviously, we're in preseason. There won't be some guys playing, all that good stuff. Maybe a couple things that you may be watching for from a Tennessee team that we've talked about. We aren't incredibly high on, but just some things that you watch for as a football nut, maybe in some of these games.
Yeah, I would say for Tennessee, obviously, you have to go with the new wide receivers that they have, right, and the new weapons that they have. We talked about it last week, right, with Robert Woods. With obviously when they signed a free agency, Austin Hooper, as well as drafting Treylon Burks. It's like, there's a lot of new pieces for Ryan Tannehill. So like, kind of in a similar way to the Colts, like how do they all mesh together? How do they work together? And that's going to be something to watch. Is like, how does just Tannehill, does he have a favorite target out of these three guys? And how does Treylon Burks look, and how does Robert Woods look off of that major injury? So those are kind of the things I'm looking for specifically when it comes to Tennessee.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. I'm interested to see who they trot out there if they decide to play starters, specifically the wide receiver group. I mean, we've talked about it before. We'll call it a little underwhelming, I suppose, just because there's so much uncertainty given the several of their receivers aside from Robert Woods, are rookie players. And, I'm interested to, like Cody said, see what Treylon Burks can do, and if he can, mesh maybe sooner than the Titans are, expecting. Because I really think for them to have success, as we talked about before, I think that's going to have to happen. I think he's going to have to really step up and take on that number one role. I think it's really hard to maybe count on a guy like Robert Woods, although, who's been productive. He is coming off of that ACL injury. So again, kind of echoing what Cody said, I think that's something to monitor. I've heard rumblings of Kyle Phillips and his role and maybe more of a slot. It's interesting to see, maybe what his looks, what he looks like in his NFL preseason debut, if he's given playing time. And then I guess the other player that I'm really kind of keeping my eye on is, and if he gets any playing time, it's Derrick Henry. I mean, last time we saw Derrick Henry, he wasn't exactly the Derrick Henry that the NFL is used to seeing. He didn't really have much of an impact against the Bengals in that playoff game, as I've mentioned before. And so I'm interested to see how he looks coming off of that injury. And I mean, it's something to certainly keep an eye on, along with the shuffling along that offensive line.
Yeah, just following some of the kind of news right now, at least on the Tennessee side, as we're talking about them, is Derrick Henry's not going to play in this one. Dontrell Hilliard, which is the second string guy, was also wearing non-contact jersey as of yesterday. So you may get seeing old Colt start the game for them, and Jordan Wilkins, and then Hassan Haskins should be the next guy up. I think, again, looking at these rookie receivers, I'm with you guys, but I've got a couple other guys that I'm looking at here in this game, and that's going to be Malik Willis. And does he start the buzz early in camp, or in preseason, I should say, about giving Tannehill a little bit of run for his money? And the other guy I've been hearing has been getting a lot of love out there, and obviously he was a combine darling, is Chigakonkwo. With Hooper being a veteran and two of their other tight ends that right now depth chart wise are like fourth and fifth, just returning as of yesterday, I think you're going to see a lot of run out of Okonkwo, Jeff Swaim, guys like that. But from a Baltimore standpoint, you're not going to see Lamar. They've already said that. You've got 5 out of their top 7 receivers that either aren't playing or are just returning, which tells me you're probably not going to see them. But again, we know those two top running backs, Gus Edwards is still on the PUP. J.K. Dobbins has just returned from the PUP. So I think again, you're going to see a lot of Tyler Huntley. You're going to see a lot of Tylan Wallace, some lesser named guys. And then Isaiah Likely is a guy that out of Coastal Carolina that they drafted that I'm kind of intrigued to see on that side. And I think we'll figure out real quick from Tennessee standpoint. We know that they don't have a lot of names there on that defensive side of the ball. And I think that really gets tested in preseason. But I think while you may not look at the wins and losses, I think you're going to look at the output given up. And I'm really intrigued because right now they've got, 3 rookies on that second string there and a couple of other guys that didn't get a lot of run last year, and Rashad Weaver out of Pittsburgh and Naquan Jones. So, it'll be interesting. It kicks us off on Thursday. Nothing national television wise. I'm sure they'll replay it on the NFL Network like 782 times, like they do most other games. But the Patriots and Giants game takes the cake there. What game you guys want to hop to next?
Yeah, I was thinking we'd go with Jacksonville. Oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank on who they're playing.
Cleveland this week.
Cleveland, thank you. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, given the lack of playing time in the Hall of Fame game, I haven't heard or seen anything that would suggest that Trevor Lawrence is going to be out there. But I'm kind of interested to see if they maybe give some of their veteran receivers a go. Zay Jones and Christian Kirk, some of the guys that they brought in the offseason, maybe even Evan Ingram at the tight end position as well. When you bring in new offensive pieces, kind of like we mentioned earlier, it's important to develop rapport and cohesion, and not just in a practice setting, but in, an in-game type of setting as well. And I'm interested to see, obviously teams aren't too revealing with their offensive, play designs or what have you in the preseason. But it should be interesting, what Doug Peterson, former offensive or former head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles that was given much credit for that Super Bowl run a few years ago for calling plays. I'm interested to see what maybe his offense looks like, and if he brings over any different any concepts that kind of mimic what we saw in Philadelphia, and if we'll get a chance to see anything like that.
Yeah, I'm just interested to see for Jacksonville. Just a couple of the new faces around. Like, we've heard all about ETN. We've heard all about Trayvon Walker and the Hall of Fame game and stuff like that. So, like, how do some of these young pieces look for Jacksonville? I'm really intrigued in that. And, how do they, depending who does play, how does that running back spread look between, ETN and also between James Robinson as well. So I'm kind of intrigued by that. And yeah, even the new guys like the Evan Ingrams of the world and other guys like that, like, how does this offense look if they play some starters? Like what are we going to see from them? I'm intrigued to see that, kind of how these new additions look and, kind of what, how they all kind of fit and mold together for Jacksonville.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested to see kind of how they play their cards, like you guys said. I mean, you're coming off a game that didn't look very great against Vegas. But when you look at players and the snap percentages and things of that, I mean, your leading snap percentage you had from a receiver is Kevin Austin, which right now sits at like depth chart number 8 for them. And your second best guy is Tim Jones. And I quite honestly couldn't tell you where Tim Jones or Jeff Cotton Jr. are from, but they're the second guys on the snap list. And then from a tight end perspective, Ingram didn't see any, Chris Manhertz didn't see any, but Dan Arnold saw 15%. So kind of an interesting move just made today, by the way. They did cut Kyle Sloter, it looks like, which is the guy that they played at played quite honestly. I felt like they played him the most in that game. They did cut him and bring back EJ Perry. So again, no telltale signs. There's nothing crazy out there right now as far as, what the expectation is. But then they go against the Cleveland team that's playing their first game with, 4 quarterbacks on the roster, but in fairness, like really 3. So do they play Brissett? I mean, he is their backup, but he's probably really more like their starter this year. You've got the Kareem Hunt situation in Cleveland. I'll be interested to see if they get any FaceTime with him during the game. I always think that that's an interesting conversation with players and kind of seeing how they react. And then a guy that just returned from the PUP list 3 days ago, Andrew's favorite guy that he wanted the Colts to take, and David Bell, right now sitting 4th on their depth chart. Is he going to get any time, or is he just not seeing enough snaps? So, again, you don't put a lot of stock in the preseason, and in fairness, when you see a game and it's Jacksonville and the Browns, you're like, but as a gambling junkie who consistently looks at the over-unders, they're technically projected to have 4 points more of an over-under than the Tennessee and Baltimore game. So who knows? That being said, I'm going to hold the Colts game to the last one just because I think that we'll all have a lot to say about that one, and kind of kick into the Saints and Texans here. Obviously, both teams' first game. They are the over-unders 33.5. Cody, I always throw some betting stuff out there, but don't. It's not like we're a betting show, but just always like to throw that out there. I think it does do a decent job of talking about what they're seeing or what people believe we may see. So Houston, it's their first preseason game. They really haven't had a terrible amount of injuries, other than the cancer diagnosis of John Mechie, which obviously is a sad situation for John. But other than veterans, I think you actually may see some of these guys go. I mean, they've only got 3 quarterbacks, so I can't imagine they're only going to play 2 of them. Running back wise, I don't think you'd probably see Rex Burkhead, but I think everybody else may be in play. I mean, Marlon Mack hasn't really gotten a whole lot of full looks when he was on the Colts for a while now. And then on the other side of the ball, on the New Orleans side of the ball, it'll be really interesting to see what's going on there. Jameis is obviously injured, so I think you're going to get a ton of Ian Book, in fairness, even though Andy Dalton's the number 2. We obviously know Kamara's got his kind of looming suspension, so that myriad of backfield work between Malcolm Brown, Tony Jones, Abe Smith, Devine Ezekbo, those guys, I think you're going to see some of. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a whole lot of middle receiver work. So Callaway's, Traquan Smith, those kind of guys, maybe a Kevin White, the rookie Dejon Dixon type of stuff. And then I'd say again, like a Jawan Johnson, maybe at tight end. Nothing crazy from the Saints, but what are you guys looking for from Houston? Even though I know we've talked about how we don't much love them this year.
Yeah. For Houston, I think obviously it depends, how many of their starters play, but if they do play, definitely how Davis Mills looks in year number 2, what exactly that looks like for him in this offense. And, now he may actually have a legit running back. Cause I think we could all say we love Marlon Mack and love what he did. It's just Jonathan Taylor happened. And so there wasn't room for him on the roster, but I do think he has a good opportunity to still be a really good back in this league. So, how does that look? Does that help, this offense out anyway? And can Mack stay healthy and all that stuff? Those are all question marks. But, how does Marlon Mack look, coming off a season where he really wasn't utilized a whole lot? Is he running a little angry, or is he doing some things? And then, just from Houston's sake, just okay, outside of, you already mentioned a couple of those wide receivers, but outside of Brandon Cooks, who's going to step up in this offense? There's a couple different guys that could potentially step up, but who's going to be that, Davis Mills' second favorite target? I guess is my big question. Who's going to kind of emerge in this offense? Is it going to be, I can't remember his name, the tight end that they drafted a couple years ago. I'm totally spacing on his name.
Brevin Jordan.
Yes, thank you. Brevin Jordan.
He's been having a killer camp, evidently.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. He's been looking really good, and so I think all signs point to him kind of breaking out this year. So Can he? That's the big question for me. And yeah, how can who's going to rise up now with obviously John Mechie probably not going to play this year, if at all, for a while. So, who's going to emerge as that wide receiver 2 for this season? Is anybody going to step up to the plate? I don't know. So that's kind of my big thing for Houston right now, is just kind of, is Davis Mills that guy to lead this charge? And, are some of the guys that they brought in going to kind of help him out and kind of help him, he had a really good rookie season, but even going from that to taking the next step, and I think this will be a good indication of what we'll see out of Houston this year.
Yeah, I would agree. I think one of the most interesting players I think that I'm kind of keeping my eye on is second-year wide receiver Nico Collins. I think he had a solid year for Houston last year. Obviously given the circumstances, and I'm interested to see, does he take that next step as maybe their number 2 wideout next to Brandon Cooks? Brevin Jordan, I was super high on. I think I'm almost 90% sure he went to Miami. I was super high on him coming out of college. And I, obviously from what Adam said, it sounds like he's had a really strong camp. And so, are those offensive pieces, kind of like Cody was saying, are they enough to help elevate the play of Davis Mills to the point where you kind of put all of your eggs into his basket, so to speak? Reports, things that I've seen and read, or that Houston seems to be really, really high on Mills. And Cody, kind of like you mentioned, he had a pretty solid year given the circumstances. And then I'm interested to see what this team looks like defensively. Do they, trot out any of their starters, or do they kind of just sit back and let their 2 and 3s, take most of the reps? Defensively, Houston was one of, if not the worst defense in the NFL last season, and some of the additions that they made, are they enough? Along with maybe the defensive mind of a Lovie Smith as your head coach, is that enough to sort of catapult this defense to, certainly not one of the league's best, but at least can they play, at a better, can they play better, I should say, defensively on that side of the ball? And is there anybody that's going to maybe stand out? I think there's always, really with any NFL team, there's maybe 1 or 2 players, whether it's offensively or defensively, that usually stand out, that kind of catch, most diehard NFL fans like us. We usually kind of catches our eye. So is there anybody that's going to stand out for that Houston team defensively too? That's something I'm keeping an eye on.
And fans, you knew we'd get there. The last game we're going to talk about in the AFC South is the Indianapolis Buffalo game. Or should I say the Case Keenum versus Nick Foles game. Yeah, it's interesting. I was at camp on Monday, and I think I was off air when I was talking with you guys about this, but Paris Campbell did get hurt again on Monday, and then he sat out the rest of the practice. So I don't know that you see Campbell here. With that being said, from a Colts perspective, things that I'm curious about is where and how does that Deion Jackson, CJ Verdell line lie? Got a little chatting time with Devontae Price, who's out and has been out for a couple days, but I was there that day he was out, and he just said he kind of tweaked his ankle a little bit. So he said he'll be fine. But, from a receiver standpoint, I think you're going to see a whole lot of Ashton Doolin, Patman, and a guy who they picked up the other week, and I don't want to call it under the radar because I'm not saying like he's going to just wreck the NFL type of guy, but Isaiah Ford has actually been looking pretty good in camp along with Kiki Huti. So I think you're going to see a whole lot of that. I'm also really intrigued to see how the tight end situation kind of plays out. Jelani Woods has been rumored to not be having an outstanding camp, so not 100% sure what that's about. Mo Ali Cox tweaked his knee about a week ago. He has been out there playing. But then the other thing I'm looking for is that whole, Jack Cohn, Nick Foles, Sam Ellinger, to see what kind of split and playtime we get from those guys. because I think, again, Andrew, on Cody's live stream the other day for Bringing the Juice, I was talking and we were talking about surprise cuts, and I threw one out there that one of his guests so candidly put that I'm crazy. But I put Nick Foles as a possible surprise cut for me. I don't think he's looked good in camp. I know he's a Frank Reich disciple, but I'm very curious to see what the team thinks of him. And I think in these games you really get to see how the team feels about somebody. And then on Buffalo's side, make no mistakes about it, their backup running back is probably the most explosive player next to Stephon Diggs on their team. And that's James Cook, the rookie from Georgia. So I'm super interested to see what he does and see how the Colts defense corrals, quite honestly, a fairly shifty back that can catch the ball a little bit. And then rumors are that Khalil Shakur, who was a guy out of Boise State that they drafted this year, seems to be a quote-unquote lock for the roster. So kind of curious to see what he looks like. And I don't believe he's fast. So in my brain, it'll be interesting to see if he's just a really good route runner or what. And then the tight end from Texas A&M, Jalen Windermeyer. Right now, he's sitting way down on their list at number 5 on the depth chart, which surprises me a little bit. But again, I don't think you see Singletary. I don't think you see much of Zach Moss. I'd be blown away if you see Stephon Diggs and probably even Gabe Davis, especially with, Marquez Stevenson out. And Isaiah McKenzie's already been seeing first-team reps over Jamison Crowder. So this Colts game could be interesting. It's obviously interesting because it's the first real hitting of another team that we get to see. And the fact is it's 4 o'clock on a Saturday, so you still got plenty of time at night to hang out and watch all the other games. What are you guys thinking?
Yeah, for me, it's the biggest matchup that I kind of thought about this yesterday. I was putting together Thomason's training camp takeaways, my mini series, if you will, for Stampede Blue. So if you haven't checked that out, I do one, every training camp, with the exception of last week. I was feeling pretty crummy, so I maybe skipped a couple practices. But from here on moving forward, it'll be after every practice. But I digress. The biggest matchup that I think I'm really paying attention to is the notable changes along the offensive line. Now, I think there's a caveat to that in saying that, are the Bills going to start, or play some of their starters, I should say. And the Colts, is that offensive line, because if you play Matt Ryan, you have to think you play the entire starting offensive line. How are they going to look against whatever defense Buffalo sends out there? I mean, certainly if they're the 2 and 3s, you would hope that the offensive line, dominates, like they should, most, second and third string players. But if Buffalo decides to play some of their defensive starters, I mean, how do you look against an Ed Oliver? Or, if you somehow, I'd be kind of shocked if Von Miller's out there. How does Braden Smith or Matt Pryor hold up against, a Super Bowl MVP pass rusher in Miller? That's something to keep my eye on. I think, the notable changes at left tackle with Matt Pryor and Danny Pinter at right guard are certainly noteworthy, which is a little redundant. So apologies there. But it is something to keep an eye on. Do we see more of kind of a quick rhythm passing game from Matt Ryan, given the changes along the offensive line? And then, obviously, I think like a lot of people, I'm interested to see how much time Alec Pierce gets, and potentially Jelani Woods or Drew Ogletree, pardon me, who I think has had a really, really solid camp. How much playing time do we see from them, and how do they look in this offense? So those are kind of the 3 big keys that I'm looking for, Colts-wise.
Yeah. I would say I don't want to try to be too redundant. I mean, talk about left tackle. How does both those players look, Pryor and Bernard Ryman, against their respective players they're going against? I guess I'm curious a little bit about kind of that, that 4th, I guess, defensive end position. Like, who's it going to go to? Is it going to be a guy like Ben Banogu, who I think, physically fits exactly what you're looking for that Leo position, behind Yannick Ngakoue? Or is it more of, like Ifedi Odegnigbo, I think its name is. Sorry if I butchered that, but there's a couple guys that I'm still intrigued by that could potentially be that that fourth defensive end there in that mix. It's just like a question of who's it going to be. If I'm talking about the back end of the roster and stuff like that, definitely still that cornerback 2 battle. I think both corners and Brandon Faison and Isaiah Rodgers offer different things to this team. So I think they're both going to be utilized a lot. Obviously Faison a little bit bigger, has a little bit more of the, traditional, what they're looking for in that Gus Bradley cover 3 scheme. So I'm intrigued about that. And then I would say also I'm intrigued about this young safety tandem as well in Julian Blackman and Nick Cross. Guys, the Colts released their first unofficial depth chart earlier today, and Nick Cross was a starter on there. So I think that means he's going to get a lot of reps here in this first preseason game. I'm really looking forward to seeing kind of what he can bring to that strong safety position because I think he has a great opportunity here to really show out. I guess maybe, to not talk about tight end. I agree with that as well. But I think also like RB3 and RB4, because right now I think RB3 is Phillip Lindsay's to lose. But RB4 is kind of a question mark right now. Like who's going to be that guy? Is it going to be Devontae Price? Is it going to be CJ Verdell? Is it going to be Tyson Williams? Is it going to be a guy like, I'm totally spacing on his name. Deion Jackson. Is it going to be like a Deion Jackson guy? So many options for that RB4. So like, how is it going to shake out? And I want to see all these running backs on Saturday's game because I think they all deserve a shot at potentially, making the final 53 man. And right now, I don't honestly know who's the favorite right now to land RB4. So those are some of the things I'm looking forward to.
As we like to do here, Adam Schefter just tweeted, clearly Houston must not be excited about their depth at tight end because they just traded away a 6th-round pick and picked up Adam Shaheen and a 7th-round pick from the Miami Dolphins. So, again, not exactly a fantasy ticker tape type trade, but as we were talking about Brevin Jordan and really what we're all hearing has been a great camp. They clearly are a little concerned about what the depth looks like behind that. Farrell Brown must not have been playing well, and some of the other guys like a Tegan Cartiano, and no clue who that is, and an Anthony Auclair, who's literally been a journeyman for Tampa Bay for like what seems like 10 years. So, again, caught a short week. Just wanted to talk about the games, wanted to get some content out for you guys. We are working on a new platform here, so would love to get some feedback from you guys and look for some live streams this year from this crew, as well as make sure you keep checking out Andrew's new articles at Thomason's Training Camp Takes and Cody and Derek over at Bringing the Juice podcast. Really have enjoyed my interactions with you, Cody, and haven't got to chat much with Derek yet, but I'm sure he must be a good dude if you let him work with you. So, anything for the crew before we cut it off for the week, guys?
Just appreciate you sticking around. Sorry, Cody.
No, go ahead.
It's NFL football finally is back. We're talking the full pads, full helmets, gloves, gear, socks. And I mentioned it earlier. We're all diehard NFL fans, and we get excited about the little stuff like that. So thanks for sticking around, and looking forward to doing more of these in the future.
Absolutely, yeah. I feel like this is going to be a great year for hopefully the Colts and also for the podcast. Really excited to, feel honored, like I try to say a lot, like I feel honored that you guys have welcomed me on as you have, and feel honored that the people that listen have been so gracious and so supportive so far, and really excited to see how this thing grows.
For sure, man, for sure. And just some dates to keep in mind, guys. August 16th is the cut down from, NFL changed kind of their cut rules. So it does go from 90 to 85, not a huge cut. The first real cut is August 30th, which is 80 to 53. But some guys are playing for their jobs this week. So it'll be fun to watch. Thanks a lot. And we'll talk to you viewers later. Have a great one.